Most people believe maturity arrives with age, education, or spiritual titles. They believe wisdom automatically follows time, yet time alone sharpens nothing. It simply passes. Today, I want to guide you into a quieter, rarely spoken truth. In the Shaolin tradition, maturity carries a very different meaning. It is not measured by how much knowledge you collect, nor by how calm you appear in comfort. It is measured by how little your impulses command you, how rarely emotions seize your actions, and how softly the ego speaks inside your mind. A highly mature person remains steady when pressure tightens, not rigid, not numb, steady, like a mountain that does not resist the storm, yet remains unmoved. In this video, you will learn 12 signs that reveal true inner maturity, signs rarely discussed openly because they challenge identity, habits, and comfort. You will see how ancient Shaolin training shaped the ability to stay clear while surrounded by chaos, disciplined while tempted, humble while powerful. These teachings were never designed for performance or approval. They were forged for survival of the mind. As you continue watching, certain signs may feel uncomfortable, others may feel deeply familiar. That reaction itself reveals awareness awakening. Stay until the end, because the final insight ties all signs together into a single principle that determines whether a person lives ruled by the world or stands rooted within. This knowledge transforms relationships, decision-making, and inner peace in ways that surface motivation never reaches. Welcome to Heng Yi Chronicles, a space dedicated to self-mastery, discipline, and timeless wisdom. Subscribe and walk this path with us, slowly, steadily, and with clarity. Most people do not realize that life rarely defeats them through force. It defeats them through speed. An insult arrives, a fear appears, a desire pulls, and before awareness can stand upright, the body has already moved. Words escape the mouth, actions are taken, regret follows quietly behind. In Shaolin training, the first battle is not against another person, but against this instant collapse into reaction. I am Shi Heng, and what we cultivate is the space between what happens and what we do. This space is small, often invisible, yet it holds the difference between being ruled and being free. When a student enters the temple, they are not taught to strike first. They are taught to observe. The body remains still while the mind watches. Breath slows. Tension is noticed, not obeyed. This is not passivity. It is preparation. Observation before movement allows energy to settle instead of scatter. In this pause, the impulse loses its authority, the emotion reveals its shape, the ego exposes its hunger. Only then does action become clean, precise, and necessary. Reaction is unconscious movement driven by stored patterns. It belongs to the past, repeating itself in the present. Response is different. Response is born from trained awareness. It is the result of discipline practiced when nothing is happening. Hours of stillness, repetition, and restraint prepare the mind to remain open under pressure. A mature person does not suppress emotion, nor do they obey it. They witness it arise, peak, and pass, like watching clouds cross the sky without chasing them. In daily life, this training shows itself quietly. A mature person does not rush to defend their image. They do not answer immediately when provoked. They allow silence to stand between stimulus and action. In that silence, wisdom breathes. The moment slows. Choice returns. And what follows is no longer reaction, but deliberate movement aligned with inner order. Silence often frightens the untrained mind. When sound fades, thoughts rush in to fill the space, restless and demanding attention. Many mistake this noise for life itself. They keep themselves occupied, not because they are fulfilled, but because stillness exposes what has not yet been faced. For a mature person, silence is no longer an enemy. It is no longer something to escape or fill. It becomes a familiar ground, steady and supportive, like returning home after a long journey. Through discipline and patient observation, the inner chatter begins to soften. Thoughts still arise, but they no longer shout. They pass without demanding obedience. This does not happen by accident. Ancient traditions understood that silence must be trained, not forced. Hours of sitting, breathing, and restrained movement were designed to teach the mind how to settle without resistance. Over time, the constant need to comment, judge, and label loses its grip. Awareness remains, but agitation fades. In true stillness, clarity does not arrive as a dramatic revelation. It emerges quietly, without effort, like a reflection appearing on calm water. Decisions become simpler because confusion has less space to hide. Insight arises not from thinking harder, but from thinking less. This is why silence was valued more than speech in many ancient teachings. Words can explain, but silence reveals. A person rooted in inner stillness does not feel the urge to fill every moment. They listen fully. They act deliberately. When challenges appear, the mind does not scatter. It remains collected, able to see what is essential and what can be released. Silence becomes a source of strength, not withdrawal. It is not emptiness, but fullness without noise. In that quiet presence, mastery continues to deepen, unseen yet profoundly felt. At an early stage, the mind searches for causes outside itself. When anger appears, someone must be responsible. When sadness arises, something must have gone wrong. Blame offers quick relief because it places the weight of discomfort on another's shoulders. Yet this relief is temporary, and it quietly weakens the one who carries it. Ancient disciplines understood that as long as a person believes others control their inner state, they remain untrained, no matter how knowledgeable they appear. With maturity, a subtle shift takes place. Feelings are no longer treated as accusations, they become information. Instead of asking, "Who caused this?" the question becomes, "What is happening within me?" This change marks the beginning of emotional ownership. It does not mean denying pain or pretending calm. It means standing still with the sensation, allowing it to be seen clearly without rushing to escape or explain it away. Emotional avoidance fades when awareness becomes strong enough to remain present. In old training halls, students were taught that the world is unpredictable, but the inner response can be refined. Circumstances will test patience, people will disappoint, and outcomes will remain uncertain. None of this is considered an obstacle to mastery. It is the training ground. When responsibility for one's inner state is accepted, power quietly returns. No one else needs to change for balance to be restored. This discipline does not harden the heart. It softens it. When blame dissolves, understanding grows. One begins to see that others act from their own conditioning, just as one once did. Compassion replaces resentment, not as an idea, but as a natural response. Emotional ownership creates space between feeling and action, allowing choice instead of compulsion. From this foundation, self-mastery begins to take form, not through control of the world, but through steadiness within it. When discomfort arises, the untrained mind looks for an exit. Noise, movement, conversation, and consumption become shields against feeling too much. Distraction is not chosen consciously, it is reached for instinctively. Yet every time pain is avoided, something essential is left unexplored. Mature individuals sense this difference. They no longer rush to escape discomfort. They remain where they are, breathing steadily, allowing sensation to unfold without labeling it as good or bad. In ancient disciplines, pain was never romanticized, nor was it treated as an enemy to be defeated. It was approached as a messenger. Physical strain, emotional heaviness, and mental resistance were signals pointing toward limits that needed understanding, not suppression. Endurance was trained without aggression. The body was held in stillness, not to prove strength, but to cultivate clarity. When resistance softened, pain lost its power to dominate attention. This endurance does not mean forcing the body or silencing the heart. It means staying present without adding stories. Many suffer not from the sensation itself, but from the tension created by fighting it. When resistance dissolves, discomfort often transforms. It becomes information. It reveals habits, fears, and attachments that operate beneath awareness. By sitting with pain, instead of escaping it, insight emerges naturally. Over time, this practice reshapes character. The mind learns that it can remain intact even when conditions are difficult. Confidence grows quietly, rooted in experience rather than belief. Challenges no longer feel like threats, but invitations to deepen awareness. In this way, endurance becomes gentle, not rigid. Pain is no longer chased away nor clung to. It is met, observed, and released when its teaching is complete. At an early stage, the sense of self is fragile. It needs constant reassurance to feel real. Approval becomes nourishment, and without it, insecurity grows restless. Words are used to impress, achievements are displayed for recognition, and identity is defended whenever it feels questioned. This hunger for validation is subtle, yet exhausting. It keeps attention turned outward, always waiting for confirmation. Maturity begins when this hunger is noticed and no longer obeyed. Through discipline and self-observation, the ego gradually loosens its grip. Confidence no longer depends on applause or agreement. It settles into something quieter and more stable. There is no urgency to announce strength, wisdom, or intention. In ancient training, this restraint was considered essential. True ability did not reveal itself through display, but through consistency. The most skilled moved without noise, acted without advertisement, and left no trace of effort behind. When confidence becomes quiet, behavior changes naturally. Speech becomes simpler, explanations shorten. There is no need to convince because clarity is already present. Presence begins to carry weight. Others sense steadiness not through words, but through the way attention is held, how silence is honored, and how pressure is met without collapse. This kind of authority cannot be rehearsed. It is earned through long practice and honest confrontation with one's own insecurities. Letting go of validation does not create distance from others. It creates authenticity. Relationships deepen because interaction is no longer driven by performance. Actions align with inner values rather than external reward. In this state, effort decreases while impact increases. A grounded presence communicates more than explanation ever could. Without seeking recognition, one becomes recognizable. Without trying to impress, one becomes trustworthy. This is the quiet power of maturity. In a world that rewards constant expression, silence is often misunderstood as absence. Many feel compelled to respond to everything, to fill every gap with opinion or action. Yet with maturity, speech becomes intentional. Fewer words are chosen, not from hesitation, but from clarity. Each word carries weight because it is not released impulsively. Saying less allows meaning to deepen. What is essential remains. What is unnecessary falls away. Ancient disciplines placed great value on restraint. Students were taught that unnecessary movement wastes energy and unnecessary speech scatters the mind. Knowing when not to act was considered a form of wisdom equal to decisive action. Stillness was not inactivity, it was readiness. By waiting, observing, and allowing situations to reveal themselves fully, the right moment became clear. Action taken from this place required less effort and created fewer consequences. This restraint shapes behavior in subtle ways. A mature person does not rush to correct, interfere, or assert control. They allow others to move, speak, and reveal themselves. Interference is replaced by presence. When action finally comes, it feels natural, almost inevitable. There is no force behind it, only alignment. This is why mastery often remains unseen. It does not announce itself. It does not seek recognition. It simply functions. In daily life, this quality appears as calm judgment and precise timing. Challenges are met without haste. Opportunities are recognized without grasping. Energy is conserved rather than scattered. Over time, others may sense this steadiness without being able to name it. That is the mark of true refinement. Mastery that demands attention is incomplete. Mastery that operates quietly, without display, reshapes everything around it while leaving no trace of effort behind. Many believe peace is found in comfort, in absence of challenge or struggle. They seek ease as if it were the ultimate goal, mistaking stillness of circumstance for stillness of mind. Yet comfort alone cannot train the heart or sharpen awareness. It can soothe, but it cannot teach. True maturity reveals that what feels easy often masks stagnation. Only through deliberate effort, through the gentle shaping of discipline, does inner steadiness arise. Discipline replaces indulgence. The body and mind are trained not by surrender to fleeting pleasure, but by consistent practice, restraint, and focus. In ancient traditions, this was never punishment. It was preparation. Fasting, repetition, and rigorous training were designed to reveal the mind's habits, to expose weakness, and to cultivate endurance. Every act of self-control strengthens the unseen foundation upon which freedom is built. The person who has learned to endure without complaint discovers a freedom that comfort alone cannot provide. Advancement demands letting go. Each step forward requires releasing something familiar, old habits, attachments, comforts, and sometimes even cherished beliefs. Progress cannot coexist with clinging. Pain, uncertainty, and loss become tools, not obstacles, because they reveal what remains hidden in the mind. In Shaolin halls, students learned that surrendering desire and expectation was not weakness, it was clarity in action. The path is narrow because it asks for honesty and courage, not because it rejects pleasure, but because it teaches the discipline of choice. This understanding reshapes daily life. Decisions are no longer driven by ease or habit. Challenges are faced with patience rather than avoidance. Happiness is no longer dependent on indulgence, but on alignment with a deeper principle. Comfort may still arrive, but it is not mistaken for the quiet, steady presence that only discipline and surrender can cultivate. Many spend their lives pursuing the need to be right, believing correctness defines strength and intelligence. Words are wielded like weapons, debates become arenas, and listening is reduced to preparing a counter. Yet maturity reveals a different measure. Correctness is less important than clarity. What matters is understanding the shape of truth, not holding it as a shield or proof of superiority. When clarity guides action, the mind becomes lighter, and decisions emerge naturally without struggle or force. True listening requires patience. It is not a passive act, nor a strategy to respond. It is a practice of opening completely to what is spoken, allowing meaning to enter without judgment. By listening to understand, one sees beyond the surface into intention, context, and subtlety. Ancient masters taught that wisdom begins not with explanation, but with observation. In observing deeply, the mind learns to distinguish between impulse and insight, between ego's claim and reality's voice. Ego softens in this process. The compulsion to defend diminishes because the need to prove oneself is no longer the measure of value. Silence grows comfortable, and the mind rests in the intelligence of attention rather than the excitement of debate. With this softening, wisdom deepens, not as accumulation of facts, but as the steady ability to perceive, judge, and act from clarity rather than fear or pride. Daily interactions become exercises in subtle mastery. Challenges are met with calm inquiry rather than agitation. Misunderstandings are navigated with discernment, not insistence. Even conflict becomes a mirror, revealing hidden assumptions and habitual patterns of thought. The mature mind understands that truth is not a weapon and understanding is not a conquest. By releasing the need to be right, one gains the capacity to see clearly, act wisely, and navigate life with a quiet, unshakable balance. The world is rarely still. Circumstances shift, plans falter, and people behave unpredictably. For most, this instability triggers turbulence within, an inner storm that mirrors the chaos outside. Yet maturity reveals a different possibility. External instability need not collapse the center. When the mind and body are trained, when the foundation is cultivated from within, the world's movements can pass without overturning peace. In Shaolin philosophy, the inner structure is considered the true source of strength. The body is aligned, the mind focused, and the breath steady. Only after this internal stability is established can external skill be fully expressed. Without it, power becomes brittle, and even the smallest disturbance can break composure. Training begins in stillness, standing, sitting, breathing, observing. Each repetition builds resilience quietly, not for display, but for endurance. This is why masters often appear calm in the face of chaos. They have cultivated a sanctuary inside themselves that no external force can penetrate. Calm, in this sense, is not a fleeting mood or avoidance of difficulty. It is a trained state, forged through patient discipline and repeated confrontation with pressure. Challenges are encountered without collapse, emotions are felt without being consumed, and decisions are made without haste. The mind learns to move like water, adaptive yet consistent, responsive yet undisturbed. In everyday life, this manifests subtly. Deadlines, arguments, or unexpected change no longer provoke panic. Even when circumstances demand rapid action, the mind remains rooted. The body responds, the heart endures, and clarity persists. Over time, calm becomes habitual rather than conditional. It is not dependent on external ease, but on internal cultivation. This quiet stability reshapes perception, allowing one to navigate life with precision, grace, and an inner authority that cannot be shaken by the turbulence outside. The untrained mind is often at the mercy of impulses. A thought arises, a desire sparks, and action follows almost automatically. Life feels like a series of reactions, each driven by craving, fear, or habit. For those who cultivate maturity, this pattern begins to shift. Impulses are observed, not obeyed. They are noticed as fleeting events in the mind rather than commands demanding surrender. By creating this space, the individual discovers a freedom that is rarely understood, the freedom to choose consciously. Ancient disciplines emphasized that true choice arises only when the mind is still enough to see what is emerging. Decisions are no longer dictated by immediate sensation or passing attraction. Instead, they are guided by values, by principles that reflect long-term integrity rather than short-term comfort. In Shaolin practice, this is seen in both physical and mental training. Every movement is deliberate, every response measured, every commitment tested against the deeper code of discipline. Over time, action becomes alignment rather than reaction. This alignment is the essence of disciplined freedom. It is paradoxical. The more restraint one practices, the less one is bound. Self-mastery does not constrict. It expands perception and choice. Desires arise, but they no longer dominate. Challenges appear, but they do not dictate action. Each moment becomes an opportunity to act from clarity rather than compulsion. In daily life, this translates into subtle but powerful presence. Relationships, work, and personal growth unfold with intention. Habits are reshaped not through force alone, but through consistent awareness and quiet correction. Even in pressure, the mind remains poised. The impulses that once directed life now serve as teachers, guiding attention back to what matters. In this way, discipline and freedom coexist, not as opposites, but as inseparable aspects of a mind trained to respond with wisdom rather than habit. In the beginning, solitude can feel like a void. Silence stretches long, and the mind protests with restlessness, fear, or longing for distraction. It is often mistaken for loneliness, a gap that must be filled with noise, activity, or the presence of others. Yet with maturity, the experience transforms. Solitude becomes nourishing instead of threatening. It is no longer a space to escape, but a space to meet oneself with honesty and depth. Ancient disciplines, particularly within Shaolin and contemplative traditions, treated solitude as a teacher. Students were guided to sit, observe, and confront their own patterns without distraction. In this stillness, the mind reveals its habits, fears, and delusions. The heart speaks more clearly when external voices fade. Here, dependency begins to dissolve, not through avoidance, but through recognition. Reliance on validation, comfort, or constant engagement gradually softens, replaced by a quiet self-sufficiency. Meeting oneself deeply requires patience and courage. The process is often uncomfortable because it exposes shadows and attachments previously ignored. Yet as awareness grows, inner companionship strengthens. One discovers a presence within that is constant, attentive, and understanding. It is not the ego that comforts, but the grounded awareness that perceives and accepts. Life becomes less dictated by the whims of others or the tides of circumstance. Decisions are guided by alignment with this inner steadiness rather than reaction to external influence. In daily life, this manifests subtly. Time alone no longer triggers anxiety or urgency. Silence feels complete rather than empty. Engagement with others becomes richer because the mind is full rather than seeking to be filled. Inner mastery grows quietly, not as a show of independence, but as a lived familiarity with oneself. Solitude, once feared, becomes a sanctuary. It nourishes insight, discipline, and clarity, offering the deepest form of companionship that no external presence can replicate.